of us to think. You either lie when you sing that song or you tell the truth when you sing that song. Or is your heart actually crying, Abba, Father? Do you come to Him with confidence, knowing that your sins have been paid for? Or are you singing this song and not really fully telling the truth about your own soul? Really a lot of truth in that song. So, and many of the other ones that we sang, the others that we sang this morning too, a lot of good truth in there. All right, children, we're going back in our story to the time of King David. King David had ruled, and he, so to speak, ruled with a rod. He was putting his enemies in place. He was subjecting them to himself and the throne of Israel. You know, David was only the second king Israel ever had, right? The Israelites came out of Egypt. They went into the promised land. And then for many years, they worshiped God and served God without a king, without a ruler. And they cried to Samuel, make us a king, give us a king. Finally, Samuel said, you won't like having a king. It's not going to be a good thing, but I'll give you a king. So he gave them the greatest man in the kingdom, Saul, the strongest, the biggest man. And Saul, as long as he was small in his own eyes, did well. And then he rose up and he became a very depraved king. And they ended up chasing David all through the mountains, trying to kill David because he knew that David was the young, up-and-coming great king, right? David had been anointed by Samuel to be the next king to replace Saul. And when David came to the throne, we saw something new happen for the Israelites. They were becoming known across the whole world. Everybody knew who the Israelites were and their great King David, because he had slain thousands, tens of thousands of people himself, and he had killed that great, great man, Goliath, with a stone and a sword, Goliath's own sword. Remember that? And so his fame spread everywhere, and he became a world-renowned power. Everybody knew David. And he became great and strong and rich and wealthy, but he spent his whole life proving himself. Enemies would rise up even within his own family. As a result of his sin and his depravity, he fell a couple times, right? We saw him fall into sin, into shame and guilt, and he prayed to God to forgive him. So his heart always stayed kind of close to God. He was trying to pursue God and do the right thing. But he had a lot of bad things happen to him. David and Solomon's mother heard about it. Absalom tried at one time, and David grieved very harshly about that, and he had to leave Jerusalem and come back as a totally different king and try to gain the people's respect again. But right at the very end of his life, one of his sons, I think his name was Adonijah, tried to take the throne. And David, basically from his deathbed, had to recognize what was going on in his kingdom. And he stopped that and said, no, Solomon is going to be king. He had made a promise, and maybe he had invested some more time and energy into Solomon to the point where he believed that Solomon would be the greatest king, the greatest one of his sons to be king. And so here we're going to see the beginning of the reign of King Solomon. Before David dies, though, he does one more thing. Because David had made so many mistakes and had failed in so many ways, he relays to his son Solomon, he said, I need you to take care of some things. There's some stuff that I should have done in my reign that I didn't do, and I need you to take care of it. David, yes? We're going to be in 1 Kings. I'm going to start reading probably in chapter 3. Until that point, I'm just going to kind of tell some of the stories. David, at one point in his life, do you remember when he had to take some of Saul's descendants and kill them all? Do you remember that story? Who remembers that story? He slew them and hung them up. And then finally, peace was brought to the land. Do you remember that story? The reason why those men had to be killed was because Saul had slain innocent people. And God was now punishing the people in David's day because of the innocent blood that was shed in a previous generation. Innocent blood. You know what innocent blood is, right? David slew thousands of people, but their blood was not innocent. Saul had killed a whole tribe of people, or tried to kind of wipe them out, and that had been innocently done. These people were to be protected, and Saul went ahead and killed them. And so now David's reign was suffering because of it. And so David said to God, what do I do? And so finally they took some of Saul's descendants, killed him, hung him in a tree. A very brutal, disgusting way of dealing with things. But then finally peace was brought to the land of Israel. So this tells us something about the way God operates, doesn't it? If innocent blood is shed, if people are doing wicked, evil things, and judgment is not done to those people, then sometimes the next generation and the generation after have to suffer because of it. And so David, on his deathbed, he wants to ensure that this does not happen to his son Solomon. So he says to Solomon, just before he dies, he says, there's quite a few people that need to be dealt with. There was some men in my kingdom that did evil, wicked things, and I didn't punish them. I didn't slay the blood, I didn't take the blood of the men who did these evil crimes. So the first thing on your agenda, King Solomon, is take care of the injustices that I allowed to continue under my reign. You understand what I'm saying, boys and girls? Injustices. Justice is when somebody does something wrong, they pay for it. If they didn't pay for it, that's not just. That's not right. It's not a good thing. And I think our country will suffer the injustices of our system that we have in place here. So the first thing David says, Solomon, I need you to take care of these things. So guess what David, young Solomon, has to do in his first years as a king? He has to go and clean up his father's mistakes. And you know how he does that? He takes a certain priest that rebelled against David, and he has him killed. He takes David's old chief of staff, his man that was in charge of his armies and stuff, and he has them killed. And he slays all these people. Sounds like a very brutal system. But David wanted there to be peace in Solomon's reign. And now, guess what we know, looking back in hindsight? There was never a greater reign of peace than that of Solomon. You know what that means? Solomon didn't have to go to war. Imagine for a moment, David, he gave up thousands and thousands of young men, 18, 19, 20-year-old men, 25, 30-year-old men. He gave them to war and to battle, and they could not have children. They couldn't raise their children. They couldn't build businesses. They couldn't make money. They couldn't live in peace. There was constantly more and more soldiers going out to battle and dying and coming home, and there was widows and there was orphans sometimes, or there was children left without fathers, and it was a terrible time. David regretted that his whole life, and he said, I don't want that to be the case with Solomon. And sure enough, under Solomon's reign, all of Israel's enemies had been made subject to Solomon. And now the only thing that's standing in the way is the people inside the kingdom of Israel that shouldn't be there. And so David said, let's clean this all up. And so Solomon spends his first while. Whether all of that was a good or bad thing, I don't know for sure. I'm not understanding enough to know for sure. But Solomon went ahead and did it. He took all these people, he cleaned them up. And now in chapter 3 it says, Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. An affinity is to make a deal with somebody. He made a pact. King of Egypt did not want to fight against Israel because Israel was way too powerful, way too strong, way too wealthy. And so here's this young king, and he makes a deal with Pharaoh. And then he does probably the first big mistake that maybe even leads to his demise. Do you know what demise is? That means Solomon goes higher and higher. He's getting stronger and more powerful and more wise. But eventually, he kind of comes crashing down. And right here, this next statement is the baby step that leads to his demise, his fall. And it's this. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall of Jerusalem round about. So the first thing he does after making an affinity, after cleaning up Israel, he makes an affinity with Egypt, and then he married Pharaoh's daughter and made her his first wife. Now, what's something very strange and unique about Solomon that you can think of, about wives? He had a lot of wives. The Bible says he had 700 wives. and 300 concubines. Now that doesn't even register in my mind as making any kind of sense. I can't figure that out. But some people, if they have a lot of money, a lot of wealth, a lot of fame, they get pretty disgusting. And that's what happened to Solomon. But we're not going to get to that part of the story yet. We're going to start out at the good spot where Solomon starts and where his reign and his power becomes really beautiful. He brought her to his house until he had finished making his own house, the Lord's house, and he built a wall around Jerusalem. So he made Jerusalem a beautiful, beautiful spot. Very strong and powerful. Only the problem was, here's the problem, verse 2, the people sacrificed in high places because there was no house built unto the name of the Lord until those days. And Solomon loved the Lord. He loved Jehovah God. Walking in the statutes of David his father, only, this was his one downfall, this is the one thing he did that wasn't right, he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places. We could get into all of that, but God had prescribed exactly where and how they should make sacrifices, right? How was it? He told Moses, in this tabernacle, in this place, with these priests, at this time, this is how you do it. Now the priests were no longer doing their job. The tabernacle was all in shreds, perhaps. It wasn't really working properly. And there was no house of God in Jerusalem. And so Solomon went up to high places, and this is where the Gentiles around them would worship their false gods. And so Solomon was worshiping the true God, but he was worshiping him in the wrong way. And so he needed to make a house for the Lord. Solomon loved the Lord. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. I can almost see Solomon in his ignorance. Ignorance means he didn't really know what to do. He didn't know how to go about life. He didn't know how to be a king. You know, when I became a dad, and even sometimes to this day, I'm now a dad of young women. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it. I've never done it before. And I don't have somebody teaching me, instructing me. My dad's not here to kind of show me the way. He is, but he didn't know how to raise young men and women. He didn't have any women at all in his house. And so I'm learning for the first time, and that's what I feel like Solomon is doing. And so out of his zeal, out of his excitement, he says, I don't know what to do. Let's take a lot of animals and kill them all. I want to serve God with all of my heart. Many times when people become Christians, they do some really extreme, extravagant things because they really want to impress God. They really want to serve him, but they don't even know for sure what to do. And so God looks down at Solomon, and he appreciates Solomon's zeal and his desire to do things right. And so God comes to Solomon in a dream. Any of you guys ever had a dream that was special, something different, where you feel like, I don't know what that all meant, but it was different than the other dreams? Well, this one was very unique. Solomon was sleeping, and the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night and said, ask what I shall give thee. Now, you have to let yourself into this. You have to think about this. You're young, you're ignorant, you're trying to be a good king, but you don't know how. What would you want as a young king? What would you like to have? What would make you look and feel the most impressive to the nations around you? Can anybody think of something that they might want? I know you guys know the answer of what Solomon asked for, but what kind of things would you like to have if you were a young king? A castle. Money. Lots and lots of money. More money yet? Anything else? This guy's way smarter than Solomon already. I think he would give some of his money to the poor people. Maybe Solomon did that too. You got something? Yeah? So these are the things we think of, right? If I could have anything in the world I wanted to, who do I think of first? Oh, me. I would like a big house. I would like all the coolest toys. I would like orchards and vineyards and animals. And sure enough, Solomon ends up getting all this stuff. And I would like everybody in the world to respect me. I would like honor and respect and appreciation and fear from everybody. I want everything I can have in this world. You know, Solomon ended up with all those things, but he wasn't like me, or he wasn't like some of you. He didn't ask for riches and wealth and honor and reputation. Listen to this. Solomon said, Thou hast showed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy. Great mercy. I know my father David didn't always serve you the way that he should, and yet you were still with him. You were merciful to him. You showed him great mercy. According as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee, and thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. What happened to Saul's sons? Do you remember? Saul had a son. What's his one son's name? It was David's best friend. Jonathan. Jonathan should have been the king, but he wasn't, because Saul had done such wicked things that God said, your children are not going to sit on the throne. It's not going to happen. But to David, David had done really wicked things too, and God came to David and said, I promise you there will never fail to be a king from your descendants sitting on the throne of Israel. And God says to Solomon, what should I give you? And he says, you were so extremely kind and merciful to my father. And you've even given him a son to sit on his throne, me, his son. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of my father David, and I am but a little child. Was he a little child? What was he? He was a young man, right? He was, I would probably imagine him to be like 20, 25, somewhere in that range. I don't know for sure. Maybe there's a way to figure it out. He was a young married man. But what did he think of himself as? It's a really good attitude to have. God, I'm so ignorant. I don't know anything. I feel like a little baby. I feel like I don't know how to go forward. Have you ever had to go into a store and buy something and talk to a clerk on the other side? How does it feel the first time? You feel like all of a sudden you're like a little child and you can't even talk, right? I had some of my older children make phone calls sometimes because it's so awkward and they don't even know how to talk all of a sudden. They can talk just fine until they get on the phone and they're like, what do I say? How do I talk? I forget. Solomon was like that. He said, God, I'm like a little child. I don't know what I'm doing. I need more wisdom. And you don't know how many times I've prayed prayers like this. God, I don't know how to raise my children. This was one of the prayers that led me to come to know Jesus. God, I got a little baby girl, and I don't know what to do with her. I'm supposed to teach her to know you, and I don't know you. How am I going to teach her? I'm like a baby. I don't know what I'm doing. And so many times since that day, as they grow up and get older, and now as I've had some of the responsibility of the direction of this church placed on me, sometimes I feel like, God, I'm only 35 years old, 36 years old. I'm so young. I feel like I'm only 20. I don't know what I'm doing. Give me some wisdom. And that's where Solomon is leading this prayer to. He said, God, I'm like a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to go and lead the people. I don't know how to come in from the people. I don't know if I should lift my head up high. I don't know if I should have people walking before me, or if I should look impressive, or if I should look humble, or if I should do this or that or the other thing. I'm just completely at a loss. I don't know what to do. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. I'm the center of this whole group of people you've chosen, and I don't know what to do. Now he gets to his request. God said, what do you want? Here's his request. Give therefore thy servant lots and lots of money so that I can look really powerful. No. Give me power over all my enemies so that I don't have to worry about what I do, because everybody will be so afraid that they won't dare question what I do. Nope, he doesn't ask that. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart. I want to be able to look at the issues in my life, whether it's raising my children or leading people or serving people or making decisions on where to go to school or how to get a job or what to do with my life or whether to marry or not to marry or to find this spouse or that thing or this, the other, that I don't know what to do. Give me, your servant, an understanding heart, so that I will be able to look at a situation and know in my heart what I should do. Give me an understanding heart, that I may be able to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this, thy so great a people? Do you want to know the difference between good and bad? Between right and wrong? Well, everybody knows the difference between that, right? It's easy. Black is like this, and white is like that. That's simple, right? Have you ever heard the term, the gray area? What happens when you mix a lot of black and white together? If you had black and white paint, what happens? It becomes gray, right? There's a lot of times in life where you look at something and you're like, I don't see black and white. All I see is gray. It's confusing to me. I don't know what's right or what's wrong. Help me to look at a thing and see the black in it, and to see the white in it, and to choose the white, to stay away from that which is evil, and to do that which is good. Don't you all want to be like that? And now God says today to Solomon, the speech pleased the Lord, and Solomon had asked this thing, and God said unto him, because thou hast asked this thing. So it was like a test. God was testing Solomon. And God really was impressed with Solomon's request. He said, because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself. This was one of the things we didn't even think about when I asked you what you would ask for. You didn't ask for a long life. Who wants to live a long life? I do. I would love to be like 88 or 90 or something like that, and then not even die. I'd like to have the Lord come back then at that time and be raptured up and then just be with the Lord forever. That would be the best, right? Solomon did not say, can I have a long, successful life? He said, because you didn't ask for yourself a long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself. You didn't ask to be rich, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. So because you didn't ask for a long life, because you didn't ask for riches, because you didn't ask to have your enemies be subject to you, behold, I have done according to thy words. I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither shall after thee shall any arise like unto thee. What is this saying? He'll be the wisest, most understanding man this world has ever seen. Do you want to know how to be wise? How to walk justly and to do what is right? There's a whole book in the Bible called the Book of Proverbs, where Solomon wrote a lot of his sayings down for us to learn from. And you cannot find a wiser man today in the world that could come up with better ways of living and better things to understand about the world than what Solomon wrote for us, because there was never a man like him before, and there has never been a man like him since, I think, except if you count the Lord Jesus himself. And I have also, now God continues, I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked. That's cool. It's almost like a little trick, a little play on words. You can't go to God now, tomorrow, and say, God, can you make me wise? I want to be rich. That doesn't work, right? Because he didn't ask for wisdom, because he didn't ask for a long life and didn't ask for his enemies, he asked for wisdom. God said, I'm going to give you wisdom, and I'm also going to give you a long life, and I'm also going to give you wealth, and I'm also going to make you a ruler over your enemies. But you can't manipulate God and go to God and say, God, I just want wisdom. I don't care about anything else, but secretly hope for everything else. Solomon was okay without being rich. He was completely content with that. I have given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did, then I will lengthen thy days. So he says, I'm going to give you riches and wealth and honor. And if you walk before me faithfully, I'm also going to make you have a long life on this earth. That was one of the promises anyway from the Ten Commandments, right? The fifth commandment. Well, how do you live a long life in this world? Do you know? Do you remember? From the Ten Commandments? There's one commandment that has a promise that's attached to it. Honor your father and your mother. And that law, that principle has continued on to this day. The Apostle Paul quotes that and says, this is the first commandment with a promise. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. You want to live a long time in this world? You want to have a good life? Honor your parents. Obey your parents. Now, I'm going to turn quickly to the book of Proverbs, chapter 1. This was the first proverb that is recorded from the Solomon the king. Look how it starts. The Proverbs. Proverbs is another way of saying wise sayings, true sayings. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. Who wants to know how to do the right things? Who wants to be wise enough to be able to make the right decisions that will make them successful in this life? Who wants to live righteously? All of us do, right? Solomon says, here's the recipe. This is how you do it. A wise man will hear and will increase learning. And a man of understanding shall attain unto wisdom, unto wise counsel, to understand a proverb and interpretation, the words of the wise and their dark sayings. So step one, ready for it? Solomon learned this that night while he was dreaming. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But fools, what's the opposite of being wise? Being a fool. Being a fool is like a curse word. If you ever call somebody a fool, Jesus says you're in danger of hellfire. Because a fool is a really, really bad thing. And what's he saying a fool is? A fool is somebody who won't listen, who won't pay attention when wisdom is being spoken. That's a fool. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And later he says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, do we have time quickly to go to Solomon's first test? I think we do, right? Quickly, 5 more minutes. Yes, Nolan? I couldn't fully hear you, but you've been learning some Bible verses, right? That made sense, eh? Solomon awoke. Behold, it was a dream. And he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord and offered up burnt offerings and offered peace offerings and made a feast to all his servants. Then came there 2 women. You know the story, right? First test. He's been a king for a little while, and he's dealt with his father's mistakes, and he's starting to build his own house, and he's married a wife, and now here comes the first chance to judge right and wrong, good and evil. And here's his test. Do you have any wisdom, Solomon? Do you know what to do? There came 2 women that were harlots unto the king and stood before him. 2 women who didn't have husbands, didn't have families. They lived together in a house, and they each had a baby. The one woman said, "O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the 3rd day after that I was delivered that this woman was delivered also. And we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we 2 in the house." So it's like a game of Clue. Have you ever played the game Clue? Where you're trying to figure out, okay, this happened, and here's all the clues. We were both in the house. Nobody else was with us. I helped her deliver. She helped me deliver. We were there together, just the 2 of us, 2 babies in this house. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. What does it mean to overlay it? She might have rolled on top of it. That happens sometimes. She might have put too much stuff on the baby and kind of suffocated it. You have to be careful that there's not too many loose things around the baby's face where they would go and turn into a corner and their face gets smothered. One of these women didn't know how to take care of a baby properly, and her baby died. And this woman is tattling to the king. She allowed her baby to die. My baby's still alive, and I'm holding it here. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while thine handmaid slept, and laid it on her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom. So the lady had been holding it, according to this, and she had overlaid it, and it had died. And she woke up at midnight, switched our two babies around, and you know, any mom that has a baby, sometimes you guys look at babies and think, well, they all look the same. They're just little babies, right? But when you know it's your baby, if you had a little brother or a little sister, you know this is our baby. It's easy to see. This is our baby. This mother, she knew right away, this dead baby, it's sad, but it's not my baby. I know that for sure. I can see it. But nobody else knew. Nobody else could identify. They had only been born recently, and nobody had seen the babies yet, and so it was hard to tell whose was whose. And so Solomon's got a real test of his wisdom here before him. And when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. So it sounds like maybe she woke up before it was light, and she tried to give her baby suck, and then she started to grieve that her little baby had died. And she was probably torn up, and you can imagine she would just be totally heartbroken until she could look at it and see. She's like, she considered it, and she thought, this isn't my baby. My baby didn't die. Something is going on here, something very fishy. And then she heard her baby cry from across the room, and she knew what had happened. And the other woman said, nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. So now they're both claiming the same thing. They're both claiming that their baby died, the other babies died at night, and the other woman switched the babies while they were sleeping. And nobody knows whose baby is whose. And Solomon has to figure out which one. And this said, no, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Can you imagine this hissy fit and this woman cat fight that's going on in the courtroom? Their attention is rising. Their emotions are just blazing. They're frustrated and angry. One of them is heartbroken and hurt. The other one is conniving and cheating and lying and trying to steal a baby. And Solomon is trying to distinguish which one is which. They both just look hysterical. They both have lost their minds. They're both beside themselves, both with grief and sorrow and sadness. And so Solomon has an idea. Then said the king, the one saith, this is my son that liveth, and thy son is the dead. And the other saith, nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, bring me a sword. And they brought a sword. And I imagine the women kind of getting quiet and confused and wondering, what is our young king going to do? Bring me a sword? What's he going to do with a sword and a baby? Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And king said, divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other. Would you take a little tiny baby like that one there that's sleeping and divide it in two with a sword? What kind of man could even do such a thing? But they didn't know Solomon. They didn't know, will he actually do such a wicked thing as that? We don't know. That's scary to think about, right? And then, listen to this. Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my Lord, give her the living child, and no wise slay it. And the other said, let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. You hear the different attitudes of these women? Solomon was waiting to hear, what's these women's reaction going to be? The one who had her son there living, possibly crying. Her bowels yearned for her. You guys, you mothers know what this is like, right? Where your bowels yearn. My wife sometimes, when the babies are being held by others for too long, she's like, I just want my baby. I want to hold it. I want the baby. Give it back to me. And this mother, she yearned for her baby, and she said, no, please don't kill my baby. Let her have the baby then. I'd rather see my baby live with someone else than to die right here, right now. And the other woman, whose baby had actually died, she says, no, that's right. Let's just split it in two. I'll take half. She can take half. We can both bury our half. What a horrible thing to say, right? But she was so beside herself, she couldn't think clearly anymore. She said, if I can't have a baby, I don't want her to have a baby either. It's not fair. This is what happens when women allow themselves to wish someone else's life upon them. They start becoming extremely selfish and self-absorbed to the point where they will do some really wicked things. This woman was ready to let the other woman's baby be killed as well. And so Solomon, being wise now like he was, then spake the woman whose child was living, let it live, please. Then the king answered and said, give her the living child, in no wise slay it, she is the mother thereof. That's some good wisdom, right? I don't know how I would have figured that thing out. I would have sat them down and counseled with them and asked them questions. And did you see any marks on your baby when he was born? Can you tell me what he looked like or she looked like? And can you explain this or explain that? And I would have had to try to figure it out. And I wouldn't know how to do it. And he just, one simple thought, oh, I know how to deal with this. Let's pretend like we're going to kill it. The real mother will never let her baby get killed. There's no way. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. There's been a few times in my life where I feel like God gifted me with wisdom, where all of a sudden I just knew what to do. It was clear. This is the right thing to do. The gray area had become black and white, right? Is it right to kill a baby? Absolutely not. That's black. Is it right to give a baby to the wrong person? That's black too, right? And so this whole situation, these two women, they're completely in the gray. Solomon didn't know what to do. He said to God in his prayer, help me to discern between good and bad, right and wrong. And God right there gave him wisdom. This is what you need to do. And he separated the black from the white, and he knew exactly what to do. That's pretty neat, right? I hope you guys all go home now, and when you pray secretly, that you would put your heart in such a place where you would say, God, I want real wisdom. I want true wisdom. And we could talk much more about wisdom and the true wisdom of God, which is Jesus. Jesus has been made unto us wisdom and righteousness and sanctification and all that.